The Enneagram is based on your motivation. So it's based on the why, not the what. And because of that, it's a little bit more deep. It's a little bit more of a journey to figure out, because a lot of times it's really easy for us to know the things we do. It's a little harder to know why we do the things we do. And so the Enneagram is a great tool to better understand ourselves, to have more awareness about what we're doing and why we're doing it, but then also to have greater compassion for ourselves. It's a way also to relate to others, because as we learn more about ourselves, we can share that with the people we love and allow them to know us more fully and love us better.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to the show. We're Finn and Emma, and Focus Fridays are back, Finn. Are you excited?
I'm super excited. Stoked, as some people say. Plus, it's Friday. Hell yeah, it's Friday.
Woohoo! If you're a longtime listener to the show, you may remember 2 years ago, we released 10 episodes as part of our Focus Friday series, where that was season 1, and we're back now with season 2. So just a quick overview, Focus Fridays are topic-specific episodes rather than our regular scheduled interview program. So this, we're kicking off season 2 with a 3-part series all about the Enneagram, and we'll be continuing to release other Focus Fridays episodes throughout this year. So the Enneagram, we're going to be working with Kelsia today, and Kelsia is a Enneagram coach and a relationship coach. She works with Catherine and is part of the Expansive Connection team. Catherine's been on the show before, and links to her episodes are in our show notes. And but today we dive into the Enneagram, which is a personality and motivation assessment tool with Kelsia. With her, we mirror what it is going to look like, or what it would look like to work with her. And Finn and I go through the whole process in these 3 episodes. So you can listen to these 3. And if you're interested in learning more, links are in the show notes. You can buy a package to work with Kelsia, and we highly encourage you to do that. Finn and I learned so much, and it was truly a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in really quick on that and say one of the things that Kelsia says at the beginning is that we're just scratching the surface and that we don't go super in depth, but in a lot of ways we go really in depth, but also the stuff that we talk about in these 3 episodes is kind of scratching the surface on the work that you can do both personally and in your relationships by diving into the Enneagram model and working with someone like Kelsia who's very familiar and adept at it. So I would say we go in deep, but there is so much more you can do. And that's really the beauty of working with someone like Kelsia. And it's just something that, as we'll talk about later on, has been a huge, huge impact on our relationship between the two of us and our other relationships that we're navigating. And so,
well, and I think it's also just such a tool to better understand yourself. And so
without a doubt,
yeah, that's been really powerful for both of us as well.
Yeah, so we're super excited for this, and just a huge amount of gratitude to Kelsia and Catherine for putting this together and involving us in it and letting us go through this experience and share it with all of you. So we really do hope you all enjoy it.
Yes. Also, just a quick note that today is where we're releasing part 1. However, if you want to listen to all 3 parts right now, you can just go and join our Patreon community. Links are on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and you can get access to all 3 of those episodes right now.
And to be clear, they will all be available for free today, next Friday, and the following Friday. But again, if you want them ahead of time, you don't want to wait, you can join the Patreon, and you get a whole bunch of other stuff as well. But you also get access to all 3 of these.
Yes. I want to quickly echo Finn's thank you to Kelsia and Catherine as well. We just had an incredible time with this whole experience, and we are so excited to share this with all of you. So I think with that, let's jump in to the episode.
One more thing.
Sure.
If you would like to reach out to us, give us feedback, send any feedback our way that you would like to get to Kelsia or to Catherine. Links are in the show notes to contact them directly or to send us an email or a voicemail. We will listen and read them all, and we respond to them all. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you think of this. Maybe you have experience with Enneagram as well, and maybe let us know how it impacted you. So we would love to hear from you. That's the last thing I wanted to say. There's a contact us page on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Go there, reach out to us. We'll reach back out, and it'll be awesome.
That was a really good addition.
I promise it'll be a fun time.
I
send the best emails.
We send the best emails.
Yeah, we do.
But now go enjoy this powerful, I'd say, especially for Finn and I, conversation with Kelsia. Well, we can get started. So welcome, Kelsia and Catherine, to the show. We're excited to have you both here today. And this is kind of a special episode that we're really excited about. And before we dive into the specific topic, I think Kelsia is new to the podcast. And Catherine, you've been here a few times. And we want to turn it over to you, Catherine, and introduce Kelsia.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce you to one of my favorite humans on the planet and tell you why and how I know her and why you're in for such a treat. And with her full permission to disclose this, I met Kelsia because she was a client of mine. So some of you may remember and know that I have a coaching business called Expansive Connection Coaching. And Kelsia reached out to me after hearing me on a podcast, asking for some help with jealousy and codependency and some issues that she and her husband were struggling with, but specifically she wanted to work on herself. And I see a lot of people and have had the honor of walking beside many people on their journey. And something that struck me about Kelsia very early on is her ability to be self-reflective. And for those of you that have listened to our Power of Witness series, you know I like to talk about the top row of the bleachers. And in my opinion, it's often difficult for any of us to walk to the top row of the bleachers during our own game, if you will, while we're on the field bumping into things and snotting and sweating and struggling. And that's why people hire coaches so that we can sit at the top row of the bleachers and point out, hey, run left, turn right, whatever. And what I was amazed with about Kelsia is that she was able to do that about her own game. She could be down in the field talking about it and then run at the top row of the bleachers and see herself and share that insight with me in a way that I'm kind of sitting on the top row of the bleachers looking at her like, damn, girl, that's amazing. And I said to her, I pointed this out pretty early on, and I said, have you ever thought about doing what I do? And she's like, no. She had a long career doing something else. And I said, well, I just want to say that it's pretty rare to find somebody that can naturally be at the top row of the bleachers for someone else. It's really rare to find somebody who has not been in coaching or counseling before to be able to do it for themselves. I think you got a natural talent here. And she just smiled and said, oh, thanks. Blah, blah. Well, then fast forward a little while, I started working with her husband, and he and I discussed this wonderful quality of hers, which he agreed with. And we started talking about how great she would be at it. And then a few months later, Michelle Chalfant, who runs the podcast, The Adult Chair, that many of my clients I recommend them to her podcast, she decided to come out with a certification program. And when she sent the email, I forwarded immediately to Kelsia and I was like, hello, the universe is calling. I think you should do this. And apparently Jeff sent her almost the same email within 5 minutes. And so she's like, fine. Okay, you two, I'll consider it. And so we, Jeff and I, when we finally got to meet in person, high-fived and hugged about, our shared vision for encouraging Kelsia to get into this work. And then I've been lucky enough to invite her into my practice after she went through this amazing certification program with Michelle Chalfant, that I was so impressed with its clinical skills and information that they learned, the supervision that she had. I was really amazed. And my business was getting busy enough that I wanted to bring some more coaches into my practice. I've actually brought Kelsia and one other, Miche, who is a sex therapist. But Kelsia brings something to my practice that I really value, which is this adult chair certification, being able to help people with their inner parts. Also, as I said, her natural ability to sit at the top row of the bleachers and explain it very clearly and help people see their patterns and help them find new patterns. And then also her passion for the Enneagram, which is another tool that I think really helps people be able to conceptualize and have a framework to understand their motivations and their behaviors in a way that doesn't feel so personal, so that they don't have to be so defensive. Also, Kelsia is another person walking her own ethical non-monogamy journey. And that means so much to me. That's the niche that I've tried to create, is being wide open that I'm in this too. And she is, and Misha as well. We are able to cover each other. When I'm too covered up with clients, she jumps in and helps with my clients. We have all of our clients sign a disclosure where they know that we are helping each other. So if Kelsia gets stuck, she sends me a message and I help talk her through, and vice versa. And, or she might see a client for me and then they'll come back to me, or they may stay with her. Sometimes I'll send my clients and say, I want you to go do Enneagram with Kelsia, and then we'll integrate that work into our sessions. Or I'd really like for you to go do a few sessions with Kelsia really focused on adult chair, and then we'll integrate that. So I love this holistic approach that we're able to offer, and just so excited that Kelsea is part of my practice. And it's been really fun to introduce her to you, Emma and Finn. And when you all mentioned, I don't know, we don't even know what Enneagram we are, I was like, oh boy, do I have a show idea for you. So thank you for, again, going with an idea and vision that I have. And I will turn you over to the very capable hands of Kelsia. And thank you again for having both of us on.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. I know Emma welcomed you both. She forgot to welcome me, but I'm not too offended. So just, from my side as well, thank you both for being here. And Catherine, it's always a pleasure.
Well, I just want to thank Catherine for those kind words. She is so dear, and I will always be grateful for her push to find the new thing for me to do and a new way for me to love others and serve them. And I'm just thrilled to be here talking to you guys today. And I'm so happy that you don't know anything about Enneagram, which makes me so excited because I love to teach it to new people and share it as a tool with people that are just on a journey to learn more about themselves and to be better at relating to others and to show up in their relationships better. And I know that that's something you guys are passionate about. And so I'm really, really excited to be here today and share something that I have a real passion for, and I just feel like has so much ability to help others to know themselves and to know others. So I'm really, really appreciative of Catherine and you guys for having me.
Yeah, well, it's mutual. So thank you again for being here.
Well, I think we can dive into Enneagram because that's why we're here. So I think maybe starting with a little bit of a history, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, let's talk first about what the Enneagram is, and then where it came from, and then we'll kind of do a really high flyover about it, and then we'll talk about you guys, which you really paid the ticket for. So the Enneagram is a personality tool. It's an assessment of personality, and it's really just a way to sort of know yourself better. But unlike Myers-Briggs or Strength Finders, which are also great personality assessments, the Enneagram is based on your motivation. So it's based on the why, not the what. And because of that, it's a little bit more deep. It's a little bit more of a journey to figure out, because a lot of times it's really easy for us to know the things we do. It's a little harder to know why we do the things we do. And so the Enneagram is a great tool to better understand ourselves, to have more awareness about what we're doing and why we're doing it, but then also to have greater compassion for ourselves. It's a way also to relate to others, because as we learn more about ourselves, we can share that with the people we love and allow them to know us more fully and love us better. So I love the Enneagram for those reasons. I also love the Enneagram because, unlike a lot of things like Strength Finder really comes to my mind, the Enneagram is really based around the idea of what we get wrong. The Enneagram is a deep dive into our shadow side. And I love working with shadow and doing that kind of work because I feel like the shadow side is where the magic happens, because the places that we don't hit the mark are the places we can grow. You know, I have this saying I use, whereas we grow not where we're great, but where we ache. And that's what the Enneagram points out to us. People are able to usually pick their number based on what they don't like hearing. So things that they hear and instantly become greatly uncomfortable, usually we're real close to your number at that point. So it's not necessarily the cheerfulest journey, but it's a journey that has a great amount of depth and a lot of value and a lot of change that can come from it. So the Enneagram itself is that personality system. And I sent you guys a sort of diagram, and the Enneagram is based on 9 numbers. So there's 9 numbers in sort of a circle. 9's actually at the top, like the 12 of a clock, and then it goes around to 8. And the Enneagram is not, I love when people say, yeah, I love that trendy new Enneagram. It's so new. I just heard about it. The Enneagram is not trendy nor new. It is a very, very old tool that people have used a lot in spiritual traditions. There's Enneagrams referenced in texts as old as 300s. It's found all over the world, from priests and nuns to Russian mystics to South American educators. It's all over. And something I always tell people is when something is very old and also very widespread, it usually is because it's true. And I really believe that the Enneagram is a true thing. So in maybe the late 80s, a lady named Helen Palmer wrote a book called The Enneagram. And she took a lot of research and she'd done a lot of work on the systems, personality typing, and she really kind of brought it into the more modern age. She started a training program for professionals with a man named Dan Daniels, and really kind of pushed the Enneagram into the public eye in a modern way. From that, the Enneagram grew and grew. Lots of different authors, lots of different researchers started to look into it. It really gained a lot of traction in religious circles as a spiritual tool to help people know themselves. Because the Enneagram in the oldest language was based around the 7 vices or the 7 sins, it then added to later. It really is a way to look at the ways we don't connect well, whether it be to a higher power or to ourselves or to others. And so it's a really old, it was an oral way of teaching. So it's a narrative teaching. And really only in modern times has it been something that people would read or they would test on. It was just something that was shared from generation to generation as a tool. So it's an old but true thing, which is really kind of powerful and good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. We only know a very little bit going into this, so we're sitting here learning just like along with all of the listeners. So I love it. And I think, yeah, I'm excited to dive into all the different types and figure out some stuff specific to Finn and I too.
Of course, absolutely. Well, and before we get started at just, like I said, a really, really high level look at the types, there's no way that I could ever explain or teach to you guys all of the different parts of the Enneagram, in depth about each number. There's the numbers, since they're 9, are divided into 3 different categories based on where they lead. So they're called, it's just subtypes. There's also different centers. So there's a head center, there's a gut center, there's a heart center that these numbers also fall into. We're going to talk a little bit about wings and about the numbers that are all kind of drawn crazy around that diagram and what those mean. But there's no way I'll be able to get really in depth about anything. So I really will just encourage our listeners, if this becomes something that they're interested in, to do their own work and to research it and to read. And there'll be some resources we'll talk about at the end where they can do that work. But this is really going to be a very shallow dive into a very, very deep pool of learning and growth. But I want your listeners to be able to listen and think of what number maybe they feel some resonance with and they feel some connection to. And again, I'd push them to think about the places they feel uncomfortable. And also really the Enneagram is based on why, the motivations that we have for we do things. There's a lot of behaviors, and we'll talk about some examples later, that 2 numbers would do exactly the same thing in a situation, but the why of they would do it is very, very different. So it's something that you really have to think about and you really have to get deep in about, other than just what how you're showing up, or why you're showing up that way. So let's just dive in and talk about the 9 types. And I'm just going to give an overview each one, and then we'll really talk about you guys and your numbers, and then how your numbers can really love each other better and know each other better. So the first is, we're just going to go in order and go with number 1. Number 1, and there's a lot of different names for these types that different teachings and different leaders in the Enneagram world use. I'm going to give you guys a couple just because they may feel a little bit more familiar that way to some of your listeners that do know something about the Enneagram. But 1 is known as the Perfectionist or the Reformer. 1's gift and curse is that they can immediately come into a space and see what's wrong. They see all of the places that could be better, all of the places where there's area or room for growth and improvement. And so they're really focused on not just seeing what's wrong, but making it better and making it right. They have a very, very high standard of internal correctness. There is a correct way for a 1 to show up in almost any situation. And they know it. And they know when they don't show up that way too. There's very few numbers that have a deal breaker. 1 is one of them. every person who's a 1 has this internal voice. And usually, as long as they have been alive, they've had this voice, and they usually think everyone does. And it's this very harsh critic inside their head. And what it does is it points out the ways that they missed the mark, or they could have hit the mark even better. And it's just a constant voice. People have described it as like their Jiminy Cricket on their shoulder, telling them what they should do. But it talks a lot in should have, could have, where we fail. Just all of those kind of dialogues happen internally. And 1s are the only number that have that, but everyone has it. And it's a very just constant thing that they live with. It pushes them to be very responsible. It pushes them to also know very clearly, especially in their younger years, what's right and what's wrong. They're black and white thinkers, especially before they do work on themselves. They really run on accountability and details. They love others by doing things well for them. So a 1 in your life is going to love you by doing things to the best of their ability for you. And they really do like to help, but they know there's a right way to help. 1s also, because they see what's wrong, can tend to love others by pointing out what's wrong to them. And not everyone's love language is being told what's wrong with them. So it can be a struggle to be in a relationship with a 1 because you have to understand that this is just the way they present and see things, and it's not necessarily a personal criticism about you. And they really do feel like they're doing you a favor by trying to help you in your journey towards correctness. So that's a 1. 2s are known as the helper or the giver, and 2s exist to help others. They are where people that identify as empaths tend to live on the Enneagram. They feel people's feelings. They instantly come into a room and know if there's 100 people and there's 2 people struggling, they see them, they know them, and they feel that struggle that those people are feeling. So 2s are super relational. They're the people in your life that know the stories. They're the people that instantly know all of the people, the little minuscule details about the little bitty people that they only have small interactions with, they know. And 2s are hyperverbal. So I like to say, and a teacher that I absolutely love, and I'll quote her a lot, her name is Suzanne Stabile, but she says, if a 2 hasn't talked about it, a 2 hasn't finished it, because 2s are verbal processors. And so they also are verbal processors because they long for connection. And our voices are the way that we can connect with others the best. So 2s are going to often not do a good job of knowing or asking for what they need because they're so focused on others. I've told Catherine once that help is the sunny side of control. Catherine's a 2. And I think that really rubbed her the wrong way because she knew that that was a truth for her. A lot of codependent traits live in the 2 space on the Enneagram. And so as someone who obviously knows she's codependent and has worked on that, she heard that message loud and clear. 3s. 3s are our achievers. 3s are our performers. 3s are all about success type people. 3s are very image conscious. They are very appearance focused. They are very much about looking good and succeeding. And 3s have an ability where we talked about 2s being able to come into a room and feel who's hurting and read just the people maybe that are struggling. 3s have an ability to come into a room and pick up on the vibe of the entire space and the majority of the space. And that's why 3s make excellent politicians. They make excellent pastors. They have an ability to lead and pick up the energy and the desires of large groups of people. They're just one of those people that can walk into a room and tell the temperature. And not only can they tell it, they can adapt to it. 3s are known a lot as shapeshifters. They can be who you want them to be. And it's a gift they have to just really mold into what's expected or what's desired from any group. They feed on hearing that they did well. They really, really need a lot of accolades. They need a lot of praise. And they struggle with who they are without all of those things, to stand in this gap and not be praised. So that's where 3s really have to work. 4s are our romantics or our individualists. A lot of Enneagram leaders believe there are fewer 4s on the planet than any other number. And many people will go their whole lives and never meet a 4. 4s are extremely in touch with their emotions. So whereas most numbers will feel a range of emotion over a period of time, you might go through a sad period. You might go through a period where you feel a lot of emotional roller coastering. 4s do that all day long, every day. They feel a ton of ups and a lot of downs. And 4s are often described by other numbers as being depressed. They're not. 4s are melancholy. They're very comfortable in the hard side of the emotional spectrum. They're very comfortable feeling deep, intense feelings. They will seek that out. And they're the kind of people who always live in what they're not in. So they long for something that's happened in their past, and they are wishing for something that hasn't yet happened that's in their future. So they really have a hard time focusing on the here and now because they're always wishing for something else, whether it was something that has happened or something that's yet to happen. They're very dramatic. They're very creative. A lot of our artists are 4s, and they are able to do that work out of those deep emotions. 5s. 5s are our investigators. They're our observers. 5s are people who get their safety needs met with knowledge. If you've ever met someone that wants to know all of the things about all of the things, they're probably a 5. 5s really feel like the way that they can be safe is with control, and the way they can have control is to know and perceive all of the things. So they really want to know what's happening. They hate surprises. They are very much not the person to throw a surprise party for. A 5 would hate that. They want predictability because they want to plan and they want to prepare for whatever's going to happen. 5s also lead with their thoughts and not their emotions. So if you're in a relationship with a 5 and you ask them how they are, they're going to tell you what they think, not what they're feeling. It's just not an area that they're really comfortable with because it's not fact-based. 5s also can get overwhelmed very easily. 5s tend to be more introverted and more privacy-driven of all of the numbers. They really like to be alone, and they're comfortable being alone. They like to be in groups, but a night at home is going to be just as beneficial to them as a night out with some people. So those are our 5s. 6s are known as the loyalists or the skeptics. And a lot of people believe there are more 6s than any number on the earth. 6s have the ability to play devil's advocate in any situation. A 6 is also a scanner. So they're a person that's going to approach every situation and want to think about a plan for anything that could happen. They are very much worst case scenario thinkers because for them, planning for that worst case scenario protects them from the worst case scenario. And 6s have an ability to visualize in very strong detail what could happen. So they, from that, have a very easily triggered alarm system, a very sensitive nervous system. And they reach for safety, and they do that from a place of fear, very much so. A number 6 is also the only number that has 2 distinct categories within that number. So people that live from a place or a pedestal of fear do it in 2 ways. One is they're phobic. The other is counterphobic. And the way these two relate is it's the people that run towards their fears to conquer them. Those are counterphobic type people. So they're going to rebel. They're going to push against authority. They're going to question authority. And your phobic people are going to run from their fears. And they're going to want someone to come in and tell them that if you do this, you'll be safe. They're going to really surrender to authority because that's going to feel like safety to them. So they're the only number that have sort of 2 divisions within them that look very different, but fear very similar. The 7s are enthusiasts or epicures. 7s are the life of the party. 7s are some of the most fun people you'll ever meet. They reframe everything in a positive light. So 7s are your eternal optimists. 7s are the people that you could come to with anything, and they are going to turn it around and tell you what a positive it could be or it is. 7s are the people that are always looking for the next fun thing. They live for experience. They're eternally optimistic. They are always planning the next thing. 7s, I tell 7s, if you want to be a happy 7, always have a thing in your forward mirror that you're planning. Something to look forward to is what drives 7s. They hate routine. They hate boredom. They tend to be happy-go-lucky. But where we talked about 4s feeling those really hard emotions, 7s like to live on the other side of the spectrum. They only like to live in the happy emotions. And they really have a hard time in hard feelings. They will do almost anything to escape a painful situation. They're comfortable in what feels good, and they don't like being uncomfortable. So they like to be distracted, and sometimes they can be kind of unreliable if it's a hard thing. And so it's a stretch for someone who loves a 7 to also, when they're in a hard place, feel heard by 7s because they want to minimize it. They want to make it go away, and they just don't really have a lot of bandwidth for hard times. 8s are our protectors or our challengers. 8s are also black and white thinkers like 1s, but 8s sort of have this idea that to protect myself and to protect the people I love, I need to be powerful. I need to have a lot of respect, and that's going to keep us safe. So 8s have lots of energy. 8s tend to be our very strong and vocal leaders. 8s are the kind of people that will get really, really behind a cause for the underdog. So they care deeply about the underdog, but they have the courage to go out and speak on their behalf. A lot of people believe Martin Luther King Jr. was an 8 because he had so much passion, but the bravery to back it up and to go into those hard places. 8s love challenge. They love competition. They're usually seen as pretty bossy. And they don't always want to be in charge. They just want things to get done. So 8s also are the kind of people that are going to listen to their guts. They're going to be very in tune with that inner sort of feeling of what's right and what's wrong, and they follow that. An 8 is also the most comfortable number with anger. 8s are probably one of the only numbers that are going to just run headfirst into their anger. If they're angry with you and you're in a relationship with an 8, you're going to know it. You're going to know it very quickly. You're going to feel it, and then it's going to be over. So they have a really healthy relationship with anger. But they struggle with vulnerability. They struggle with hard emotions. They struggle with tender feelings because they tend to be really action-oriented and get it done. I'll also say that a lot of people say that one of the hardest places on the Enneagram to be is a female 8. Because to be, even today, extremely assertive and extremely dominant doesn't really help females all the time. 8s also don't lead with their feelings. They lead with what they want and what they feel, but from a gut level, not an emotional level. And unfortunately, I think a lot of females are still expected to live in comfort in that emotional spectrum, and 8s don't really do that. So it's a hard place to be on the Enneagram for females. Last is the peacemaker, number 9. I like to say the peacekeeper because 9s don't make peace. They do everything to keep the peace. They're also known in other Enneagram circles as the mediator because 9s are natural mediators. They're the only number that's very comfortable seeing both sides in almost every situation. They really struggle with making decisions because they really can see the good in almost any situation, both sides. 9's biggest concern in life is conflict, internal or external. And what they do to avoid conflict is they go along. 9s are mergers. So if you have a 9 in a relationship and you feel strongly about something, that 9's going to feel strongly too because they just merged right in with where you wanted to go. 9's fear is that if they speak out about their opinion and it doesn't match yours, you won't love them and you won't want to be with them. So 9s stay far away from anything that feels like, smells like, looks like conflict. They are just go along and they're fine with it. Internally, they're like, this is great. Everybody's happy. I'm happy. Let's go. So 9s are grounded. They're reliable. They're very peaceful people. They're people that people like to be with. But they struggle to speak up for themselves. They struggle to even know what they want and to listen to that. So their work is really to figure out who they are and not who they just have merged in to be with others. So that quick description is really all of our 9 types.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot.
But it's also like you did such a fantastic job, like going through each one of those. Like it was really great to follow. So thank you for that overview.
I only have one issue that I believe the perfectionists are the most fun to be around, but that's a personal personal opinion.
You're ruining it. We're going to get there in a second.
You're right. We're not there yet. That's right. Well, and I will tell you one thing I do want to say is that all of us have all of these qualities. We aren't in a vacuum. We aren't just perfectionists. We're perfectionists that also are helpers, and we're perfectionists that also are enthusiasts, and we're perfectionists that also can be the challenger. We can all be all of the numbers. It's just one number that really is the dominant number. It's the number that really is primary in our needs and our desires. So I just want to talk a little bit before we talk about you guys' numbers, just about some vocabulary that's really important to know. And it's your wings and those numbers along that Enneagram diagram that point to other numbers that are connected with numbers. So you can only have a wing. The two things about Enneagram that I always laugh when people think they know a little bit, but don't really know a lot, is people will tell me that they used to be a 2 and now they're a 9. And most Enneagram experts will agree, in fact, all of them, that you don't change numbers through your life. You are pretty much set in your number by about the age of 5. It's a mix of genetic predisposition and then where you're placed in the world, nurture nature, that really just sets up this core need and this core want that you have, and you just take that throughout your life. So you don't change numbers. What happens, though, a lot is people will get mistyped. And like I said earlier, there's a lot of numbers that look alike, but they're not the same. So I always tell people when they say they changed, I think maybe you just got a better sense of who you are, or a better read of who you are, a better typing, but we don't change numbers. The other thing is you can only have a wing on the numbers that live on your neighbors, or the neighbors to your number. So you can't be a 9 with a 5 wing. You can only be a 9 with a 1 wing or an 8 wing. And that's it. And it makes it a little bit easier because you can identify these secondary things that your wings offer. So what the wings do is, let's just take me, for example. I'm a 9. I have a really, really strong 1 wing. So my primary goal is to keep conflict at a minimum. And I'm very, very, very concerned about what other people want and other people's agendas being more important than mine. But I pull a lot of energy from doing things well and being correct and not wanting to get in trouble and wanting things to be right. So I have a really strong 1 wing. So I just sort of draw some energy or some personality, but it's secondary. My motivator is not the voice, like we talked about, and it's not that things have to be perfect. I just am comfortable in that space. So everyone has a wing. A lot of people believe that you start off your life with a really strong one side wing, and then as we grow and we mature and we just become more fully human beings, we take energy from both sides of our wings. So wings are really important, and they really flavor the fact that there's just not 9 different uniforms we all wear. We all have these little bitty nuances that make us different. The lines on the Enneagram diagram point to the number that your number goes to, either in times of need or stress, or in times of excess or overflow. So the 2, for example, is a helper and a giver, and they're a lot about other people's feelings. But when a 2 is struggling, when a 2 is in a really bad place, and they can't take care of themselves in their number and in their 2-ness, they're going to reach across to the 8, and they're going to access a boss or a challenger or a really verbal ability to speak up for themselves that they wouldn't normally have in their 2-ness. So when a 2 is struggling, you're going to see a really dominant and a really direct message from a 2. And they're going to that 8 to give them some strength. On the other side, when a 2 is doing so well and they're just their most healthy place, they've got extra. It's like their cup is running over. And they're going to go down to the 4, and they're going to sort of just play in that 4 energy. They're going to play in this feelings and in just what's happening. And they're going to dream about what could be. And they're going to reminisce about what did happen. And they're going to kind of go into that 4 place just with all their extra energy. So those are the lines. And they're also really important because when we talk about you guys, I'm going to talk about how to know when your person maybe is in excess or when they're in stress or when they're doing well, because those lines are going to show you behaviors that they may do. So those are just really kind of the last parts that as your listeners do more deep dives about this, they're going to want to learn about their wings, and they're going to want to learn about this directional arrows.
Yeah, and just a note, and we mentioned this in the intro, but the diagram that you're referencing is available in the show notes, so people can go check that out because it is important.
It's helpful to look at as you're describing all of this.
Yeah, it's a great wheel to kind of follow around and figure it out. And the diagram that I gave you and you're giving your listeners also has more information about the sort of the heart centers and which numbers are in which, so they can also do more reading about that if they'd like.
Awesome. Do you have anything else about like Enneagram in general? I guess maybe I should look at you. Do you have any questions about Enneagram?
No, but obviously I already spoiled where I fall on the diagram. However, I would just like to point out that I said that 1s were the most fun. And I think what you just explained is there's an arrow going from 1 to 7, which was the enthusiast. And so in theory, when I'm in a good place, I am the most fun. So
absolutely. That's so true. You absolutely nailed that, Finn. When you are just your most healthy and your cup's running over, you're going to absolutely take all that fun and all that what's next and all that let's go energy from a 7, and you're going to really embody that in your oneness. So, yep, you already figured it out. So, and absolutely, let's talk about you guys. So, Finn, you're a 1. And the way I knew that is we talked about the voice. And I will tell you, the voice is louder or softer based on where we've done work. A lot of times when people take tests, and I'll tell your listeners, think about before you started doing work on yourself, if you've done any sort of self-work or any kind of improvement to yourself or any kind of just reaching to be your best self. Because older patterns are going to be truer patterns for Enneagram work. So, the voice tends to get quieter the more we come to peace with ourselves and the more we come to accept ourselves and love ourselves and have more compassion for ourselves, but it still stays there. And I think that the ability to see what could be better is one of the gifts of a 1. Everyone needs a 1. If your company doesn't have a 1 in it, you're going to struggle with growth and with areas of improvement. Every family is great to have a 1 that can point out the things that we could be doing better and the ways that we could grow. So 1s are amazing, and we need 1s. We need all the numbers, but we really need 1s in our lives to help us define the areas that things can be improved, or otherwise we'd all just be static and hanging out and doing all the fun stuff. So we need 1s. Where, Finn, you probably have some just commonality with other 1s is a lot of people that I work with that are 1s have a lot of shoulds. So they really have a lot of times where the word should comes into their brain. It might be for a group, like we should do this. It could be a personal thing, like I should do this. It can be past, I should have done that. But should is a lot of language. And something that I'll point out to 1s to work on awareness is to catch themselves when they are in a moment of shoulding. What is that coming from? And to just really kind of use that as a pause to say, oh, maybe this is some perfectionism coming out. Also, something that 1s do that a lot of numbers don't do is they tend to read the instructions. They tend to do things the way, shocker, they should be done. So 1s aren't going to build a bookshelf just by going, well, that probably goes there and that probably goes there. And then they've got 10 pieces left and they're okay with it. That's not going to fly with a 1. It's no, we do steps 1 all the way to steps 50. And if there's extra parts, we're sending this thing back because they obviously went somewhere. And then we talked a little bit about the dishwasher example. A lot of times people that are 1s don't like anyone else to load the dishwasher. What it is about American culture that the dishwasher is just the precipice for conflict. But apparently there's a right way and there's a place that the cups go and a place, the direction that the plates are supposed to face, and 1s know it. And while we talked and you said, well, yeah, I think there's a right way, but I don't want to spend the effort to go and redo it. That's probably a mature 1. An immature 1 is going to go reload that dishwasher, or they're going to ban anyone in the house from touching it with them. So 1s know there's a way to do things. Thank goodness. And another thing that 1s really struggle with is multitasking. Well, they can multitask, of course, but they feel sort of like they're not giving each thing as much attention as it needs, and there's a possibility that it won't be done the way that they really know it should. So 1s are not the best. If you love a 1, don't ask them to do 3 things at once because they will, but they won't love it. Another thing that 1s really love is feedback. 1s really want to hear from the people they love what they could be doing better for them. 1s want to know areas they can grow. In a career, a 1 is going to want merit-based promotions. Don't just give me a raise or give me more responsibility because for some nepotism or some silly reason. They want to know that they earned it. And that's important to 1s. They really want to earn where they go. But they love accountability. Hold me accountable. I'm already doing that for myself. They want that from their bosses and their spouses and other people too. One last thing that 1s, I think more than any other number can do is struggle to turn their brains off. 1s think a lot. They struggle sleeping a lot. I have lots of clients that are 1s, and we talk a lot about sleeping. We talk a lot about turning off and being able to just shut down that brain. And so I oftentimes will write recommendations for my 1s to find something that you don't have to think. Find an activity to do where your brain really can turn off and rest. And and that make sure it's not something that you could do perfectly. So it needs to be something where there's not a winning and losing or a perfect way to do it. And look for that to give yourself some time and some space to be free from the right way.
Yeah, I would be curious what an example of something that you can't do perfectly is. And I know that sounds like I'm being facetious, but to be honest, like it's very persistent.
Yeah, I agree. I think for a lot of ones I've taught is to do something where an observation type thing. So I have ones that have gotten way into, I have a friend that's a 1 and she got way into horticulture because for her, it wasn't about growing the plants. It was about knowing what they were. And so she kind of pushed herself into a little bit of a 5 space where she started to gain knowledge and learn about something new, but not to be tested and not to showcase it and show that she was right, but just for her own good and just to treat herself. Another thing that ones I think is a good thing is to do physical activities where there's no winner or loser. So team sports can be great, but even running, I had a 1 and he was a great just athlete. And he said, yeah, I really love physicalness, but I find myself competing against myself, even if there's no one else to compete with. So we had talked about running and we talked about all kinds of things. And he said, yeah, well, I track it. So I know if I didn't run as fast as I ran yesterday. I said, okay, well, this is not a good activity for you. So we need to find something else. I think creative things can be that way. What's the right way to write? What's the right way to paint a picture? It's things like that where maybe you can let go of correctness. And it's just reaching for things, but also trying things and saying it's not for me is a stretch too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was maybe, if you're okay with it, I was going to speak to some of the stuff around instructions or directions and following them and how this actually manifests for me, because it's interesting when you say so my background is in engineering. And when you say reading the instructions for a bookshelf or putting something together, for me, reading those instructions is typically to find that there is a better way to build the bookshelf than the instructions actually said. So I usually read them after I build whatever I'm building, because I have some ability to put things together just by looking at the pieces. And this is a fun exercise for Emma and I to build things together, because she's usually looking at the instructions and I'm already building the thing, and she's a little bit frustrated. So anyway, I typically don't read the instructions for the sake of that when it comes to building things. Where I do is with games.
I was just going to say that example. We have to play a game exactly by every single rule.
And so for me, and it's interesting, I was actually just explaining this to someone the other day. I don't care whether I win or I lose. For me, the point of playing the game is to play the game, but to play it the way it's supposed to be played. I always try to win, but I don't care. If I lose, for me, it's more important to be able to play the game again and then try to do better the next time. So I actually find games that last maybe 20 to 30 minutes are my favorite, because I can try it. And then the next time I can usually convince people to play it 3 or 4 times with me. And then I can continue to do the improving. So again, with games and if a rule gets mixed up and maybe even we misread the instructions, for me, those games that we played that were not by the rules we didn't really play the game.
That doesn't count.
Yeah.
And so, and it's frustrating as hell to other people, or we'll be 20 minutes into the game and I'll read a rule that we missed. And I'm like, well, we got to start over. And people are like, no, we're not fucking starting over. We've been playing this thing for 20 minutes. We're just going to play it. And then it bothers me for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I thought it was interesting. I just wanted to point out, for building things, I look to the instructions to probably improve them. And for games, I look to them because to me, there's a way to play the game. Now, I have also games we played a lot, we've improved upon the game, right? And said well, yeah, that's the rule, but like this way is more fun if we're all playing by that rule. So even then I'm trying to make more fun, which is why I'm a damn good 7, because I'm really trying to have the most fun, to be fair.
Now listen, just to be fair, everyone wants to be a 7. When I took a test, I was like, I'm going to be a 7. I'm going to be a 7. I'm not a 7. But we all want to be the fun. We always want to be the life of the party. So yes, you're lucky that the 7's on your line. So you get to be 7 when you're doing really well. So I'll ask you, Finn, is a lot of ones I've talked to have a little slice of perfection in their life. So in other words, they like to have a place or a space or something that they get to keep perfect. Maybe it's their car, maybe it's their closet, maybe it's a room in the house, maybe it's just something that, I know a one who keeps his inbox to 0 every day. And that's his little bit of this is right. Do you have anything that you can think of that's your little place where you really try to strive to just make this little place perfect?
I'm trying to think.
I have one. It's little.
Let's hear it.
Notifications and things open on your phone.
Oh, yeah.
Like
I never have multiple, like when I'm done looking at a text message, when I'm done looking at anything on my phone, everything is closed. There's never anything open.
Yeah.
And
it only annoys me when he picks up my phone to do something and then closes all of my stuff. And I'm like, hey, that's not your phone. That's my phone.
He's helping you, Emma.
But I will say, and not that I've perfected it being a perfectionist, but I have let go of a lot of the things where I used to drive for perfection. So I have let go of a lot of that and found ways to be okay. So yeah, inbox was one of them, especially with the podcast. Like if we got an email, I had to respond to it immediately. And if it wasn't responded to immediately and the inbox was at 0, now my personal email is a different beast, but like there were certain things that were like, yeah. And I've started to relax on those in a lot of ways, I think. And yeah. Mm-hmm. So there are some, I maybe as we're sitting here, I'll think of some others that I keep.
Maybe checking finances too. Like that's not like doesn't have to be perfect, but it's something that's like a habit. I don't know if that's the same type of thing.
Yeah, but even that I've let go. Yeah. I used to check our bank accounts like 4 or 5 times a day. And I've been able to be like once a week is okay.
Right.
So.
Right. And I will tell you that that's the place for push for ones to let go of right, to know that things can just be and be okay. And so that's really going to be, and you've obviously done that work and I applaud you for that, because just to be able to not focus so much on the right way or the wrong way, like when you're talking about the game and you're like, we have to start over. We weren't playing it right. We were wrong. How can we keep going? That push. And that's where the beauty of the Enneagram is, the awareness of it. And we're going to talk more when we talk about you guys' numbers together about ways that you can kind of see that in your partner and then support them through it. But that's a huge one, a huge, huge thing that you've done. And it just shows you can pat yourself on the back and say, wow, I've really grown in this place. So that's a good thing.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I was just thinking of one other one, and I don't know if this fits, is like if somebody sends me a text message, like I typically have to be the last one to say something in a text. So like if somebody responds, even if it was something like, oh, well, have a good night, I have to be like, I have to have like one more thing. I have to like, all messages have to be like responded to. And maybe that falls in that. I don't know. Maybe that's OCD. I don't know.
Well, and I will say that lots of ones have OCD tendencies for sure. And usually more obsessive type things than compulsive. Again, that's being in your head, thinking about things over and over again and wanting them to be right. So lots of people that are ones also would identify with just some aspect of OCD. So that's really, really common. Really common.
And accurate.
Yeah. We love truth, but we hate truth. Right. Emma, what about you? Emma, you and I are the same number. You're a 9, just like me. And so 9s we want other people to be comfortable. That is something that we strive for. So one of the biggest ways to make people uncomfortable is to make a big fuss. So 9s to make a big fuss, is not going to happen a whole lot of times in their lives. We also don't feel really strongly about our own preferences. So when we say, well, we'll go along, it's just because we don't have a really strong sense of caring about things. We care about big things, but little things we just don't care about. So we're just not going to make a fight about where we go to dinner or what road we take or which day of the week we do XYZ. Those just aren't worth the disruption to our sense of peace and comfortability. So 9s also, we really are big thinkers. We think about a lot of things. We're not necessarily big doers. So we like to review things. We like to plan. We love to make to-do lists. I've never met a 9 that didn't have a to-do list. Where we're not great is when we have that great list, prioritizing what's important. Because to a 9, it's just, everything's on there. I need to do all of these things. Other numbers would say, well, obviously you need to do number 2 and number 7 first. A 9's just going to go, well, they kind of all look the same. So we aren't good at knowing what should be done before other things, prioritization. So I like to say that 9s are really engaged, but they're not really focused. We just sort of take in all of the stuff and we kind of do all of the stuff, but we may not just be really focused on things. It's like everything's important, so nothing's important. That tends to be a 9 motto. So 9s don't really remember our own needs. We're not the most resentful number. We're going to talk about that with you guys about our relationship with anger because we are all in the anger triad. But 9s don't get resentful. We just forget. We just don't really think about ourselves. And 9s really, I said earlier, 9s merge. Well, what that means is if 9s hear your idea and they decide that your idea sounds okay to them and there's no reason for them to make a fuss, they just kind of get right in the car with you and go along with you where you're going. So they just tend to go along. So a story I want to tell about 2 numbers that can look the same but are very different is 2 and 9. 9s and 2s are very similar in that we care about others and we're very helpful and we're very giving to others and we're very focused on others because that's really similar in both numbers. 9s are also, again, just to use generalities, a lot of females are 9s and 2s. So the difference between a 9 and 2, and this is another great Suzanne Stabile story, but let's say that you're with a group, Emma, and they all want to go to dinner. And everybody wants to go, you really, really want to go get pizza, but everybody else wants to go get Mexican. Well, you're not going to make the fuss because you like Mexican. You're not allergic to it. You're not opposed to it, but you just really had your idea about pizza. A 2's in the same boat. She wants to get pizza, but everybody else wants Mexican. Well, she's going to go along too. So both of you go along with the group. We all get in the car and we all end up at the Mexican restaurant. The difference between the 2 numbers is when you're there and you're having your chips and salsa and a great margarita, the 9s thinks it was their idea to go. They can't imagine ever wanting anything but the Mexican. And the 2s are silently wishing they were having pizza, but they're smiling and they're there. So merging means it becomes your idea. And you can't even fathom another option. Well, this is the option. This was the way we were going. I'm so excited to be here. So that's really a great definition of 2 behaviors that would look exactly the same, but things that were happening internally where you couldn't see them that were not the same. So everybody is probably got a 9 in their life. 9s, as the ability to be peacemaker and peacekeeper, 9s have an absolute innate ability to make consensus. You want a 9 on your team because what 9s can do is 9s can hear a round table discussion about an issue. And when it gets to them, not only have they understood and heard each person's point of view, but through the beauty of a 9, they've come up with a consensus that everybody likes. 9s are the people that if you have a 9 as a friend, you think they always agree with you. And everyone thinks a 9 agrees with them. There's a great story about a couples counselor that was a 9. And he was working with 2 different people, of course, a husband and wife. And both of them came up to him separately and said, well, I really, really enjoy working with you, but I feel bad for my partner because you always agree with me. And they both felt that way about that 9. We just have an ability to agree because we really can see a lot of different viewpoints and we don't get so locked in on one that there's a right. So again, whether or not that's true, that there's a right for us, is debatable, but it's just not worth the fight. So that's a lot of 9 information.
Yeah. And I relate to pretty much all of it. Right?
Yeah.
Now, something I'll say about a 9 that's a struggle. 9s can be really stubborn, which is different than causing conflict. So, when we say yes a lot, when really inside we mean no, Catherine one time told me that there's no such thing as a non-aggressive person. You're either direct and aggressive or you're passive aggressive. And there's no place where someone lives where they're not on that spectrum. And 9s tend to think we aren't aggressive at all. But what tends to happen is that we do tend to be a little passive aggressive because over time, we say yes when we mean no and our needs don't get met. And internally, that's just not okay. And what tends to happen is every once in a while, either we'll get really stubborn about something, we'll decide this is the hill I'm going to die on. And it doesn't have to be an important hill. Unfortunately, it's just a build-up hill. So we've gotten to this place and, it's not really that important, but my gosh, it's important to us in this moment. And we can get kind of stubborn. We also can show some passive aggressive tendencies. So if I'm not comfortable directly having conflict with you, I'm going to do things that are indirect ways of having conflict with you. And so those things show up for 9s too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those are things that I'm not always proud of, but it does happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, remember I told you the things that make you feel uncomfortable are when you're pretty clear on your number.
Right. Exactly. And, as just to add, note on the wings, as you were talking about the perfectionist and the number 1, there's a good portion of that I can relate to as well. There's some of those tendencies that I have. Now it's not as strong as Finn though. So that kind of makes sense why I'm probably very similar to you, Kelsia, of a strong, I'm a 9 with a strong 1 wing.
Right. And I'll tell you that it's good because that's not your primary motivator, but it's a secondary reason. So it's probably easy for you a lot of times to understand why Finn wants something or how he feels. Again, your 9ness does that, but that 1 wing also allows you to sort of get in his head a little and feel, oh, I can understand even more so than just your natural ability to understand, but you can feel those feelings. You can go, yeah, I agree. This is going to feel better because it's right. And that's going to come up for you a lot. So yeah, that's really, really important. And I think probably just looking through Finn's things that Finn has a 2 wing because he did identify with some helper qualities and, some strong things in that 2 place of just wanting to meet needs and wanting to be there for people and being relational. So I think that's probably where his wing is too.
Yeah. As you were reading the 2, I was thinking, did I pick the wrong one? I was like, well, maybe I'm a 1.5 because I feel a lot of that, but definitely a 1. I when you explained the wings, I was like, yeah, okay. I'm firmly a 1.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's talk about you guys together. 8, 9, and 1 are in our anger triad. So all of the numbers have a relationship with sort of a hard emotion. Again, we talked about the Enneagram being about the hard parts. So there's shame and there's fear and there's anger. And so these 3 numbers are in the anger family, the anger triad. 8s, like we talked about, they're great at anger. Anger's their jam. I'm mad at you. Here's how I feel. And this is what we're going to do about it. And then poof, it's gone. Where 1s and 9s live around anger is not quite so direct. 1s feel anger, but it tends to leak out like resentment. I'll talk to 1s a lot about being angry, and they don't like to use that word. They'll say they're stressed or they're frustrated or, well, I just don't really know how I feel. Frustrated, though, and stressed really come across for 1s, and usually that's a ding, ding, ding that they're angry. And so what happens with 1s is they're frustrated because why can't everyone else just do it the right way? But they don't tend to be direct about that. And so I think that is where frustration and anger sort of live with them. And they can be resentful when they feel like other people aren't doing their best job or showing up the way that they're willing to show up, putting in as many hours or trying as hard. So 1s tend to have to battle with some resentment. And Brene Brown said resentment is really envy. It's really what you wish you had more of. And so when I had heard that from her, I really started to go to the ones in my life and say, when you start to feel that, what are you jealous about? What do you wish? What are they doing that you wish? And a lot of time it's around the freedom to let go of the correctness, to let go of the perfection. And so that's really the work around anger. For 9s, we don't even know anger exists for a lot of our lives. I remember when I first started working with Catherine and I had some real issues with some things, and she would say, well, I just think you're angry. I was like, I don't get angry. That's a common 9 response. It's like anger is the invisible man in the room. We just don't see it. We don't feel it. It's just so deeply buried because it's not safe. Anger is one of the biggest parts of conflict to a 9. And we just don't think that's safe. And when you don't think something's safe your whole life, you tend to bury it really deep. So again, it's a little bit of that passive aggressiveness, but even our passive aggressive things don't come across as direct anger. We just don't have a lot of verbiage, a vocabulary. We just struggle with that emotion. And it's just almost something that doesn't exist to 9s. So for 1s and 9s, because neither of you are really great at just, here's how I feel about it, there's work there. And there's ways to love each other in those hard places around that. And you guys share that part. So it makes it a little easier sometimes when we have some commonality to work on language about it. So that would be a place where I'd really talk to you guys about loving each other well, is giving each other doors to open when we feel mad, doors to open when we feel anger, and those be safe, and working that out between the two of you. That's just a really important part. And I always tell people anger is a push emotion. Anger pushes us to a better place. Righteous anger is one of the most beautiful things that we have. And so we want to be comfortable in that emotion. And for you guys, you can kind of open doors and have conversations around it. And it'd be places you can grow. Another thing that's really good for you two to relate to each other. Emma, it's really important to me that you understand about the inner critic, because when we don't have that as a 9, and we can understand a lot of the perfectionist tendencies, and we can definitely understand the desire to be right and correct. We can't possibly understand that voice. And so I want you to think about the most maybe shameful or guilty thing that you can think of that you've ever done in your life. And I want you to think about your self-talk around that thing. So the way you talked to yourself about that event or about those words or about that action. And when you really get into that harsh self-talk, which was deserved, was something that you were wrong in, that self-talk is the level of self-talk that Finn lives with all the time. So it doesn't matter how small or how big the mistake or error is, a 1 that's really in growth still and still working on separating themselves from that voice is going to hear that sort of self-talk all day. So when we can think about it in those terms and how hard it is for us to hold that feeling and know our partner holds that feeling a lot, it allows us to really kind of access some empathy and to access some ways that we want to help them in the work of separating themselves from the voice. I always tell 1s, name your voice. Come up with the crotchetiest, old person-y, grumpiest name you could come up with for your voice. I've heard great ones. I've heard Oscar the Grouch. I've heard, Dolores the mean neighbor. I've heard Gertrude. I've heard lots of names for the voice. But you want to disconnect the voice from you because it's not you. And sometimes if we can get sort of a funny but grumpy type name, our partner can speak to us about it without it being so making us feel defensive. So, for example, if you felt like Finn was really struggling with some perfectionist tendencies or really with maybe some shame about something, if you guys have named this, you can come alongside him as his partner and say, hey, is this Oscar the Grouch talking? And it allows him to disconnect from that voice and to stand in his wholeness without that critic. So that's a really loving thing that someone that loves a 1 can do for them. Another thing that we can do to love a 1 in our lives is to be very careful when we want to criticize them. And I mean good, healthy criticism. I mean places we need to go and ask for behavior change or we need to point out. We have to be really careful with a 1 how we do that, because since they're so critical of themselves, we want to come to them making sure it's out of love and that they see it that way, because they'll just add it to the pile that they've already got going about themselves. So always be careful about how you address things that you would like them to change, because for him, he doesn't want to hear it as I was wrong. Or I'm bad. That's really big for ones. The other thing that's really important to level 1 is that ones don't take verbal praise very well. They have an ability to sort of shake off a compliment because it doesn't really line up with their way their brain works. So I tell people that love ones, a written note to a 1 of love or appreciation is going to hold more value to them, and they might actually let it sink in a little better than a verbal one. So I always tell people that are in relationships with ones to every once in a while write them some gratitude or some appreciation, because they'll just take it in better and it'll get through that tough exterior a little bit better. Mm-hmm. So for you, Finn, the way you can really love Emma and her 9-ness, one of the things is to give her a loving push to make decisions, because it's going to teach her that it's safe for her to have a voice, that even if you don't agree with her, that you want to hear what she wants. You want to hear what she thinks. You want to hear what she would prefer. And that can also help her to dig for those, to look for those things that she really does love and she really does want, to give her freedom to not like something as much as she likes something. And a lot of times 9s just need to know that's safe. We just don't know that it's going to be okay if we disagree. We don't know that it's going to be okay to not like what you like or not to go along. So really just helping her to speak up and to give her space and to give her an option to be able to do that. Another thing is 9s need more space than even 1s to feel mad about something. So it's not just the space to express it, which you probably already have a really good, way of doing. It's the space to sort of explore it. Like, hey, did that make you feel angry? Her first response is going to be no. And maybe just to say, well, why don't you take some time and see for sure? Because it's important to me that you feel how you feel. And that just sort of opens a pathway that she can walk down and to get more comfortable with. The last thing is 9s really need patience when directions change. So another great example, I love stories, is think about a 9. I had to really teach this to my husband. When we say we're going to do something, I get completely and totally that direction. I'm ready. We're going. So think about like a big cargo ship that you see sort of carrying all the train car stuff and all that stuff. So it's going a direction. Well, if you want to change course for a cargo ship, it's going to take it. It's not turning on a dime. It's got to slowly change direction. And it doesn't mean it doesn't want to or it's not going to, but it just takes a minute to shift and to go that other way. So when we go to 9s in our lives and we change the plan or we come up with a better way, they're really, really dedicated to the way we were going. And what can happen is that shifting direction can sort of go, well, but you've got to give them time. So a lot of people in relationships with 9s will say, well, I came and I had this great new idea and she was really like resistant. Well, sometimes it just takes some time to turn the ship. And then they're going to be gung-ho and ready to go that direction too. But their first reaction may be a little bit of resistance to the fact that they've got to shift. And 9s are inertia driven. So when we're going one direction, we really, really, really have a hard time getting going that way. But when we're going, man, it's hard to stop on a dime and shift. So giving patience and understanding and not taking it personally when maybe it's a little hard for us to shift. Even if it's a better way, even if we'd rather go this way, we got to turn the ship. And that just takes a little bit of time.
That one rings true, huh?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Like a lot. Like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
So those are some ways that you guys can love each other and support each other in your numbers. Another thing is learning about the number that your partner goes to in stress. So I'm going to talk to Emma's because I know it so well. 9s in stress go to 6. And what happens when we go to 6 is we are grasping for safety. We are looking for safe harbor. So 9s in a 6 energy will do a lot of checking. So one thing I'll tell people that love a 9 is if they're not doing well, you're going to notice them checking and checking and checking, because 6s do a lot of that. Like they're scanning all of the time for there to be problems. And what happens is that even if Emma comes to you and she says, hey, things okay for whatever we've got going on? And you're like, yeah. If she comes back again, hey, are you sure we've got everything together? She's not great. And that's a sign to you as our partner that maybe you need to stop and say, hey, I noticed that you keep coming and I keep giving you the same answer, but you're coming back again. Are you feeling a little bit out of whack? Is there some stress going on, or are you in not a great place? Because when we sort of behave in that way, we're trying to get safety from another number. So learning about the numbers that you guys go to in those moments really help us to support our partner when they're not so great. So for the 1, that number is the 4. So melancholy feelings, really sort of going into that sort of place is going to be a place where Finn is not great. And it's different than just being sad. It's almost like going and camping there. So that's a way for you, Emma, to look and say, oh, maybe we're not, not bouncing right back from something. We might need to really do some work here. So knowing about your partner really does help you when they're seeking out from another number for help. If you can have dialogue and you can see that, you can speak to them in, again, where they don't get defensive. It's just, I notice you reaching for some support. Is there something going on, and can we kind of help you with it?
Yep. Yeah. I was just a couple of things that, like, I don't want them to sound like we're bragging about it, but I think we've actually started to recognize a handful of these over the last, probably really in the last 18 months, that we've started to do something about them. So a few of them, like off the top of my head. So I was for a very long time really, really bad at projecting my perfectionism onto Emma. So the voice that I heard, I would speak it to her. So her shitty voice in her head was actually her husband telling her that she wasn't perfect at whatever the hell thing that we were doing that you don't need to be perfect at. And so I did a lot of work I still have it, but she doesn't need to have it too. Yeah. And so I know that's one that I'm still not perfect at, but it is much, much better, at least from my perspective. Yeah. And then she's going to just agree with me.
Right. That's what I do. No, but a specific example is we would work out together. And while we would work out, he would constantly be telling me, oh, you could do this better. You could do that better. Squat deeper. That's not right. And like
that had to be fucking annoying.
The whole time it was like, I'm doing this wrong. I'm doing this wrong. I'm doing this wrong. And I had to stop him. And I was like, after a while, I was like, Finn, like, you got to give me a little positive reinforcement too. I want the negative, like I want the encouragement to improve, but I also need some positive encouragement because like, hey, we're in this together. Like, we're doing a great job. Like, let's be in a good mood together instead of like, nope, you got to fix that. Got to fix that. Got to fix that. And that has gotten like, we figured that out between us and has gotten much better.
Yeah. And my inner monologue is, well, like, why bother working out if you're not going to do the exercise right? But what is right? Like right is different. Well, there is some right and wrong as far as like certain exercises, sure. But like I don't know, there's certain things like that are better for certain people and different, like there's a variety, right? Just because I'm doing something one way doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right or wrong way. But, so that was a big one. The passive aggressiveness, that one's huge.
On my end.
And I have gotten really good at when she starts doing that, just saying, what are you actually asking me to do? Because I can tell you're trying to ask me to do something. Just say what it is and I will take care of it, and that's usually enough to like cut the bullshit. Like just let's just get there and then we'll be done with this and we can, you don't have to beat around the bush.
Well, and I feel like I've done a better job not doing that as much in the first place. So
for sure,
trying to be more direct with things. So.
And maybe the last one that just like, as we were talking through it, when she shifts to the number 6 to a loyalist, she tends to ask like an infinite amount of questions.
Yes, I do.
And like, you'll be like, I'll be trying to do something and it'll be like question. And I'll be like, I'll answer it and I'll think I'm good. And then like 3 minutes later, there's like a little more of that same question, then a little more and a little more. And finally I'm like, it happened literally last night of like stopping and being like, what's going on? Like, there's something wrong. Like, let's just talk about what's wrong and what you actually want to deal with, rather than like me playing 20 questions with you, because I'm running out of answers.
And then I get frustrated because I recognize it in the moment what I'm doing, and I'm trying to stop it, but I'm still doing it.
So, yeah, those are just a few, I don't know, like patting ourselves on the back a little bit that we have started to recognize a lot of these and
tendencies,
do something about them before we even had the language for it. And so it is, when you're talking through these things, and people can't see us, but we're sitting here nodding
the whole time
ferociously. Yeah, it's been, we didn't have the words for it, but we really started to recognize it really in the last 18 months and do something about it. And so I think having this, it validates, right? Like, you're like, oh, well, hey, there's apparently a whole lot of other people who are like this. That's why there's a damn number assigned to them. So I'm not some crazy person.
Yeah.
None of us are.
Yeah. And I think something that you pointed out about the beauty of the Enneagram is, one, it's such a tool for growth. That this is just language and experience around things you guys are already doing. So the beautiful work that you've done on your self-growth and your relational growth, you can see that evidenced in your patterns and in the way that you show up. And something that the Enneagram helps us to know is we aren't all the same. And I think so much of relational distress is, well, obviously, Emma would want me to tell her the right way to do a squat, because why do a squat if you're not doing it correctly? Because we feel like people we love are more like us and more similar to us, and that we love them the way we get loved, and we give them what we want. And it's just another way to realize that we're not, and to realize, oh, wait, I see you over there, and you're not just like me. And these are the things I now know about you and I'm more aware of. And awareness is the key to any kind of growth and any kind of change. We can't change what we don't know. So I just applaud you guys for recognizing those patterns and then putting some things in place, some language, some stopgaps to help you. And the Enneagram is just another tool that can help people and you, as you guys learn more about it, to have some language. You know, hey, you seem kind of 6-ish. What's going on? It's just new language. It's just another way to sort of stop the avalanche of struggle in our partner and sort of get in there and say, hey, can I help you with this? Can I be an ally? And there's no bad in that. More ways to know and love and have compassion for our partner and ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much for going through all of this with us. It's, I knew a little bit about Enneagram, but I feel like I know this is just a high level, but it still is so enlightening. And I feel like it's validating. It's validating.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. To be seen and realize, oh, there I am. Even sometimes when it's hard is a really just a peaceful place to go. It's like, oh, there's other people like me. I'm not just this totally odd thing. It's like, oh, wait, there's a whole, like you said, a whole number of people just like me. So it really is validating and helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any questions for her?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, there are a few things like on this diagram listed. So you have like for our triad, the anger triad, you have a note here that says gut. Is that sort of, I mean, can you speak about, you've got gut, sure, head, and heart for the three different sort of triads.
Right. Maybe where it's felt in the body.
Right. It is. That's really the somatic piece. So the Enneagram has a lot of in your body parts or somatic parts as well. And so those people sort of live by not their emotional feelings, but their internal feelings. Their what's right, what's wrong. It's really hard to, if I asked you, either of you, to put a name or some verbiage around, well, how do you know what's right? Tell me how you know that. You just know. How do you know that this is peaceful and this is going to cause conflict? It's just a knowing. It's an inner type of knowing that all of those numbers sort of live by. They make decisions based on that inner knowing or the gut. The 2s, the 3s, and the 4s are feelings. They're almost completely emotion driven. How I feel emotionally is going to dictate what I do. And emotions are going to drive my behaviors, and they're going to drive a lot of my whys. Your 7s and 6s and 5s are more doing. They're active. They're going to go by action. They're going to be sort of like a motion machine. They're going to do. And that's sort of how they're going to show up in the world. They're thinkers and they're doers and they're just get it done. Not so much by gut. And they could tell you also, those numbers can make you a list. Oh, here's the reasons why I'm doing this. And here's the behaviors that I'm showing. And it's all going to sort of be more visual that you could actually see. Whereas emotions and gut tend to sort of be like, well, that's just how I felt. That's just what I felt like I needed to do. Those other numbers can really kind of say, oh, let me tell you why. Here's the reasons why I should be scared of everything. Here's why I need 10 backup plans. Here's all the things I learned. And then here's all the good things to look forward to. They can make a list of the things they're doing and the things they're thinking about. So,
yeah, I think it's helpful to understand that piece as well. Mm-hmm. So if anyone's listening and by now you still haven't gone to go look at the diagram, go to the show notes and go look at the diagram because it's really helpful. I think, and this is, I'm sure we could ask a whole bunch more questions and go in a lot deeper, but I feel like we've done a pretty good job, or you've done a pretty good job, an amazing job of doing a high level overview of all of this and really giving both of us a lot to think about and reflect on. And, we'll probably come back to you with questions as well. I wanted to make sure to give the opportunity to talk about, what people can do if they're interested in Enneagram and then your work as well.
Absolutely. So a lot of people will come to me and say, well, I want to know my type. I want to know my number. And because the Enneagram is, like we absolutely talked about the past, times we've been together, it's very nuanced. There's a lot to it. A test is hard, but it is a place to start. And so there's only one test I really recommend, and it's the Enneagram Institute's assessment. It's intensive. It's 144 questions. It's going to take you at least 30 minutes to get in there and do it. And it does cost $12, but it's probably the best test out there because it's so long and intensive. It really does tend to ask the same questions to really get at your why. Because again, we're not judging behavior. We're judging motivation. And that's kind of hard to do in like a Cosmo quiz. So that test is a good place to start. From there, I'd really tell people reading and researching and really sitting with some of the things that they've heard me say or other great people that talk about it or books and websites, and just really feel what feels true to you is going to be the best way to do your typing. I do a typing that's not the Enneagram Institute's assessment. It's a little bit more personal typing. And so, of course, if they're interested in that, they can always reach out to me. Books I love. I talked several times about Suzanne Stabile. I really love her work. She's just a folksy Texas lady that just knows this stuff inside and out. And she really has a great way of explaining it with stories, which is really going back to the way it was, a narrative told story. She has 2 books. One is called The Road Back to You. She wrote that with Ian Crone. And it's really about your individual journey to find your number and to learn about it. A book I really love that she wrote is called The Path Between Us. And it's about how we relate with other numbers. It's really a relationship-driven book, and it's excellent. And of course, people can always read The Wisdom of the Enneagram, which is Don Rizzo's book. And it's pretty much the Bible of Enneagram work. It's really got a lot of detail. It's really thick. It's got lots of data in it, but you're going to get a lot of information if you really want to do a deep dive. So those are the things. If people are really they just get hooked on this and they're like, this is the thing I'm going to do, and I just want to be way into it. The narrative Enneagram is where I got my training, and they do a lot of training. You don't have to be a coach. You don't have to have anything except 24 hours and some money to spend, but they do a very intensive training that goes deep into the Enneagram, into the numbers, into all kinds of things that we would never have time to talk about. But they are a great training resource, and they really, really have a great program, and it's all done online, so people can do it from anywhere.
Awesome. We will have links to all of that in the show notes as well. And how about your work?
Of course. Well, if people want to reach out to me, I'm at expansiveconnection.com, just like Catherine and Miche, and they can find me there. I do, of course, this kind of work with couples. I do Enneagram coaching. I also just do my work with the adult chair, as Catherine mentioned in the intro. I do a lot of parts work and a lot of deep dives into just helping people live from their most adult and best self. And I do relationship coaching with couples as well. And we really work a lot about awareness and communication and just sort of being our best selves in a couple as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, again, links to all of that, all your stuff too, will be in the show notes. And Do you have anything else?
No, I just wanted to say thank you. And I think, perhaps other people listening, as you were going through the 9 descriptions, maybe that was enough for them to be like, oh, I'm probably a this. I know as you were reading them, like, I had a very visceral reaction to a 1 and a little bit to a 2, but everything else I was kind of like, eh.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think when the way that you described them, for me, it was very clear.
Yeah, for me too, as you're going through that.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And thank you for your time today. It was much appreciated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me and letting me share this. And it was just a great time, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm so glad that you guys learned something and that you didn't know anything and you got to learn about this great tool that I love. And I hope that your listeners did too. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And anytime people are just reaching for growth and to know themselves better and love themselves is always a win for me. So thank you for allowing me just to give people something they can use for that.
Of course.
Well, we appreciate the generosity in doing so.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks again, and have a wonderful afternoon.
You too. Thanks, guys.
And we're back. A huge thank you to both Kelsia and Catherine for this whole experience, right?
Yeah, it was intense. As you probably noticed, it got a little intense in there. And I will say the next one is not quite as intense as this one, and the last one is quite a bit less intense.
But they're still really good. They're
still amazing. This one was the most emotional.
Yeah, I would say that too. Most emotional for both of us. It was really eye-opening, and I don't know. It felt like we both, even just from this one conversation with Kelsea, we both had a better understanding of who you each were and how we can work together and better understand each other.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't know if we talked about it in here or not, because I ended this a while ago, but we actually originally only planned this to be a single episode, and as we were doing it, we all kind of thought, this is bigger.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's now 3. So definitely come back next week or join the Patreon ASAP as possible, and you can listen to the other 2 right now. And also, if you want to get into this yourself, definitely reach out to Kelsia and use the links on our website in the show notes to sign up for the Enneagram Experience with her.
Yes, the Enneagram Experience with Kelsia includes a whole typing process where she helps you figure out which number you are, and a 90-minute session with her. All of the details, again, like Finn said, use the links on our webpage. And by using those links, it helps Kelsia know where you found her and helps support the show as well.
So thank you in advance for that. Thank you for joining us for this awesome Enneagram episode, and we hope you enjoyed the next 2, and we will see you on Wednesday, but also next Friday.
Yes.
We're going to see you a lot. You're going to see a lot of us. You're going to hear a lot of us coming up.
Yep. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.